Hey guys, back again for part 2 of this vlog about how I got better from chronic Lyme. Probably before I get too far into it, I'll just say that I'm still not 100% better, but I'd say, you know, I'm around 60-65% better. For a lot of people on the outside looking in, it would probably look like I'm completely fine, I'm completely healthy. I have, for the most part, I have a completely normal life, you know, work a full-time job, handle some really long days at work, I have a pretty normal social life, exercise 2 to 3 times a week, have a lot of hobbies outside of exercising. So there's a lot of stuff that I can do, and when I do exercise, most of the time it's at a pretty high intensity. I will talk about that a little bit more though, because I think it's one of the things that's kind of holding me back and making it harder for me to make a full recovery. But just to do a quick recap where I left off, my last vlog, I talked about my treatments that got me to about 60% better, and around like the summer time frame, I think it was like summer time frame, early fall of 2015, I ended up getting a PICC line installed so I could pursue more aggressive IV antibiotic treatments, particularly the IV doxy. And throughout that year, you know, my capacity to do stuff kept going up and up. Once I got on that IV combo, I mentioned I was on, started with intramuscular shots of Rosefin. You know, that gave me about 20 or 30% right there. And then I continued on IV Rosefin, and then eventually IV doxy. That kept me on this slow trajectory upward. But I kind of got stuck at like this 55%, 60% mark in the fall of 2016. I was still doing pretty good though, and I remember going out playing paintball with some friends all day in the heat. I was doing some kayaking, was riding my bicycle again a little bit, and I went out and did, I was doing 4-wheel riding out at Pismo Beach in California, and it was at that point in time actually where I realized just how far I had came, because I didn't have like this nasty crash afterwards. After doing that, I was really sore because my body was out of shape. But I was like, man, you know, I kind of got into my head where, you know, in the past, I had used to race dirt bikes and stuff, and I had stopped racing years ago and got into bicycle riding. For some reason, every time I tried to pick up the bicycle riding when I got sick, it would set me back. There's just something unique about cardio, and maybe a lot of you can relate to this experience, but the cardio really just has this hard impact on your immune system. I'm not completely sure why that is. I do know that when I was training a lot as an athlete, it would suppress your immune system. I mean, there's a big difference between having really good cardiovascular fitness and having good health. But all that to say, I realized there were some forms of exercise that I could tolerate in bigger quantities than others, and for the most part, it seemed like anaerobic exercises I could handle much better than aerobic exercises. And dirt bike riding is really, even if you like go out riding for like 30 minutes to an hour, it's actually mostly anaerobic. You're just, basically it's a bunch of anaerobic efforts with a lot of little micro recoveries in between. So what I ended up doing is I had bought a bike in the fall of 2015, started riding dirt bikes again, and to be honest with you, I was fine with it. I would need about 2 or 3 days of recovery afterwards, but it wasn't setting me back health-wise. And this was like, to me, like my first major victory with fighting this. I'm like, you know, I'm around, you know, 50-55% better. I'm able to do some exercise. Throughout 2015, I actually got into a relationship. I had all these monumental things that are just like, it was great. And I think mentally that was good for my recovery as well. I was getting more positive. My hope was increasing that I was beating this. And I think, you know, again, that in itself was therapeutic. But I did start to hit a wall in the fall of 2015 where it was like, it just, you know, stuck with like, I could tell with my exercise, I was stuck at this point where I need like 2 or 3 days of hard recovery afterwards. I was still having some like relapses where I'd have, you weeks at a time where I felt really crappy. My fatigue was really bad. My mood was really bad. So I started talking to my doctor about pursuing another treatment approach. And it was one that I had heard about a year earlier. There was actually a research study done by this guy. His last name is Zhang. And Zhang is a medical researcher. I want to say he's a microbiologist. Might be wrong about that. But if you look at his history with medical research, he's done a lot of research into bacteria that form persisters. And he gained some interest in Borrelia, which is the infective agent for Lyme disease. And he realized that when you treat it with, the CD recommendation of like 4 weeks of doxycycline, it was forming persisters. The Borrelia would actually close up, form these dormant persisters that in the right environment would become active again. And they ended up doing another research study where they did this combination of all these antibiotics to figure out how are we going to eliminate these persisters. And they came up with this one combination of, I think it was daptomycin, doxycycline, and cefuroxime, I believe it's pronounced. And they were able to eliminate these persisters. And I remember the first Lyme literate doctor that I had seen over a year ago, I brought this research study and I'm like, hey, why don't we try this treatment approach? Why don't we give this a shot? I'm like, what do I have to lose? If I can get my insurance on board to cover this, what do we have to lose? And he wouldn't do it. He wasn't on board for it. I think part of it is just because, a lot of Lyme literate doctors are really sticking their necks out for us in terms of what they do. A lot of the medical approaches that they have are technically, I would say they're not legal. And they do it because they know it works. Like, people are getting better when they're getting treated with these long-term antibiotics, and you can't argue with that. But these guys are sticking their necks out there, and some are going to be more willing to do even more aggressive treatment approaches than others, and I totally get that, and I respect that. I'm appreciative that those people even exist to help us out. But it was part of the reason why I had to part ways with that doctor, because in my mind, I'm like, I need somebody that can do this, that is willing to do these more aggressive treatment approaches. So I found that doctor, and finally, in the fall of 2015, she was on board for trying to treat me with that combination. And she actually had some other patients that were more stubborn cases and were harder to treat. And she was like, you know what? They've broken through walls. They're doing better. She couldn't tell me that they were 100% better, but it had made a big difference for them. So I was like, all right, well, let's try to get my insurance on board. And that was a huge effort. And for me, what I was trying to do, since I was already near the tail end of 2015, I had actually already met my deductible for the year. So I was like, well, if I can get them on board, I'm not going to have to pay anything out of pocket. And of course, they drug it out into the following year where my deductible reset itself. And even though that was the case, I was like, well, if they'll get on board to cover that treatment, the worst thing that's going to happen is I'll have to pay my deductible. So I was still pursuing that, and for whatever reason, it bled into 2016 where I finally got approved to get on a treatment approach. And I don't know, to this day, I am super fortunate, but I haven't had to pay a dime for that treatment. But I got on that preferred combo, and I actually started with IV Rocephin, IV daptomycin, and the cefuroxime, and I broke through a wall. I went from that, I'll say 50-55% to about 65 to 70%, and I kept on gradually getting better. But I did it that initial gains within the first month of being on that combo plateaued very quickly, and I wasn't getting any better. So my doctor suggested switching out the IV Rocephin for Doxy, while also staying on the daptomycin and the cefuroxime. So I stayed on that combo, and that actually made me worse. So I went from about 65 to 70% back down to 60. And I never gained anything. I think I stayed on that combo for almost 2 months and I never gained anything. I was starting to have like the panic attacks again and just a lot of anxiety. There's something unique about the Doxy that made me feel that way. Zithromycin also does that to me, and I don't know why that is. Still haven't been able to figure it out. If you guys know something that I don't, feel free to leave a comment. But there was something significant about those antibiotics that would heighten like my anxiety for sure. So after 2 months of being on that combo, I wasn't getting anywhere, and I decided at that point to stop the treatment altogether. And this was around, I think, early spring, March timeframe of 2016. And I felt like I had done enough, and my Lyme doctor kind of felt the same way. You know, that at that point I had been doing antibiotic treatment, aggressive antibiotic treatment, for about 1.5 years. And we both agreed it was just time for a break. And I personally just wanted to see how I did when I was off of all that stuff, and just try to see if I could gain some traction with letting my immune system take care of itself. And I want to say the first 2 months when I was off of all of my treatments, nothing really happened. I kind of stayed at that same spot. But I did slowly start improving again. And in the middle of the summer, I actually ended up ending the relationship that I was in. It was just it was stressful for me, and I didn't feel like that was the right person for me. And after I had done that, I think that kind of reduced a lot of stress that was going on in my life, and that in itself was very therapeutic. And slowly but surely, I started getting a little bit better, and I want to say at my peak I got to about 75% better that fall of 2016. And at that point in time, I was exercising probably 3 or 4 times a week. I would only need a day of recovery, if that, in between like some pretty hard workouts. And I actually started racing dirt bikes again. So I was practicing like 2 or 3 times a week, and on some days in between the dirt bike riding, I was getting on my road bike, and I think I had worked up to a little bit over an hour. Actually, I remember before the first dirt bike race that I did, I think I had rode like Tuesday of one week, then went out on Wednesday, did over an hour on my road bike, and there was a pretty decent sized climb during that ride, and I just like smashed it, and I felt awesome when I got done. And then I had to get on a plane for work, fly out to Kentucky, did a day of work out there in Kentucky, then flew back on Friday, and then that weekend I did a practice day on Saturday before the dirt bike race, and then Sunday I went out and raced. So I had all this activity that week. I mean, you know, that's a lot of stress on your body, and I felt phenomenal. I felt so good, and I continued feeling good throughout the summer and the rest of the fall. And then there was a point, I want to say it was October time frame, where I kind of like kept that amount of activity up, and my bubble finally popped, and I went from about that 75% back down to about 60-65%, and I think I had just overdone it. And I spent about the next 1.5 to 2 months trying to get myself to feel better, but eventually I realized I'm not really getting anywhere. I feel like I'm backsliding, and I finally decided I had to go back to my Lyme literate doctor and just figure out a new way to move forward, determine whether or not some things had reactivated. And we got some IGeneX tests done, and I was still showing up with a pretty high positive for Babesia, and also one strain of Ehrlichia, and I was also showing up positive for a mycoplasma infection. So we started treating that stuff, and to be honest with you, I feel like I stabilized, like I wasn't getting any worse, but I wasn't getting better. And since then, I mean, since the winter of 2016 till now, I've kind of stayed at that like 65% on my best days. Still able to ride dirt bikes. Like I said, I'm going riding today. I'm exercising probably like 2 or 3 times a week. I can get into the gym, do some circuit training, and that's pretty aggressive. I mean, I just go from one workout to the next for about 30 or 40 minutes. I think altogether I end up doing about 9 exercises. Takes me about 2 days to recover from that completely. And I'm still riding my dirt bike about once or twice a week. I think altogether what I can really handle is about 2 or 3 days of aggressive exercise, 3 or 4 days if it's easy to moderate. But I'm not gonna stop until, I'll be happy with 90%, but I feel that there's no reason why I can't get 100% better, and I feel that way for a lot of people. I feel like there's absolutely no reason why we can't get back to healthy. I mean, if you were healthy at one point in your life, I really feel like there's no reason why we can't get this figured out. I certainly have my days where I feel like giving up and I feel like hope is lost, but I just keep moving forward and trying to solve this equation. But for now, I'm definitely grateful that I've gotten to where I'm at. I know, especially in that period of time. So if you look at when I first got sick, December of 2013, it took me about a year and a half to get to the point where I at least could start doing stuff again. I was having a normal social life, was dating, full-time, working full-time, no problem, doing chores around the house, and I'm still at that point. I think the only thing that's hurting me right now is when I do go out and do hard exercises, it makes me fatigued. I'd say for the next 24 to 48 hours, I'm fatigued, my brain gets more fogged up, and sometimes, depending on how hard I push myself, my mood gets disturbed really bad. Like I get really depressed and really irritable, which is it's unacceptable, and I realize that I can't push myself that hard because I can't be doing that to my body. It's not healthy. It's just not good for me. But as I've mentioned in other vlogs, about 6 weeks ago I started on an herbal protocol. I'm more open to that approach now, and I'm going to see where that takes me. So for at least 3 or 4 months I'm going to stick to this protocol and see how far I get, and I'll keep you guys up to date with how that works out. But I think one of the things I'll add to this vlog as well is maybe just take you guys with me out onto the trails today, show you some of the views out here and some of the stuff that I'm able to do now that I've been able to get quite a bit better from where I once was. So hope you guys enjoy.